have a little video to show a project that we did that interfaces between technology, architecture, and really understanding the impact of design on our biology. It's a small, it's an exhibit we did in Milan in April as a collaboration between Google, our company, the Arts Minds Lab at the Brain Sciences Institute at Johns Hopkins, and a furniture company in Muto. And what we tried to do is actually create 3 different settings with different moods and track people's reactions to those spaces, give them 5 minutes in each space with anechoic chambers in between that act as sort of palate cleansers. So this is not at all scientific in any way, but since I'm following Tara, I'll just preface that by saying this is really sort of an exploration in design to really see how could we really look at this and see what the impact we're doing physically. And the end of the experiment was that people would walk through these spaces, they would remove their band, their data would be studied. There were only 5 metrics, I think 4 metrics that were studied. And the data was converted also into a very visually pleasing image that showed them where they were at rest, where they were maybe not at rest, or at ease. These were very hard terms to define. And we arrived at kind of the facets of things that we wanted to hit in each of these rooms with a matrix that was designed with IM Lab at Hopkins, and tried to accomplish those through design. So really, as an architect, my practice for 17 years has been about really coming from a place of feeling. I've always said that form follows feeling, and I've always tried to make spaces that induce a certain kind of feeling and to come from that place. Also because I think as architects, we've sort of ceded our agency to technology and capital, and I think if we could bring it back to the body, that's a democratic ground that we can all understand regardless of our differences, and perhaps we can really make some kind of change in how we look at our world that's more meaningful and gives us more of a voice. So this is really my interest in finding this work. Prior to this project, I had started a prototype for a hospital room where we were looking to see if we could create something like a spatial prescription that would make recovery rates of kids coming out of having disorders of consciousness better. And we're still working on that prototype, and that's going to have 4 different or 5 sensory inputs, and we're going to see if we can actually study that with a medical team and see what we can do. So we're hopefully launching that prototype at the end of next year, but it's been a long process to get to that point, but it's very exciting. So based on that, this was a bit more of a exciting project that we could do for a short period of time. It was up for 7 days. We took over a 7,000 square foot space, built 3 different distinct rooms, all with real materials, real thicknesses. Nothing was fake in any of the rooms, so that you could really also feel the integrity of the spaces that you were in. So the factors that we played with were texture, material, color, lighting, sound, smell. And each of the spaces had their own character. So this is a quick little film that'll describe it to you, and we can hit play. And then I can answer any questions.
The way this project is unusual is that we are actually pursuing a principle. I really believe that form follows feeling, and feeling is really what space and architecture are about. Space actually affects people.
Design matters. It's why we spend the time making the decisions we do. Those things that we as designers intuit, neuroscience is now proving have an effect. Google created an exhibition that is showing design's impact on our biology.
The way that I explain neuroaesthetics is really simple. It's basically how your brain changes on the arts. When you have a heightened aesthetic experience, like a piece of music, a sunrise, things that really elevate your everyday experiences, they change you. They change your biology, they change your mood, they change your emotion.
I called Suchi Reddy and I said, taking the neuroaesthetic principles, could you create 3 different rooms that would evoke different responses?
The goal is to see how people resonate with space and to really find out whether what they think they resonate with is what their body is actually resonating with.
We respond to the aesthetics of our environments, whether we realize it or not. The band can demonstrate with data from the sensors that actually is happening. Heart activity, respiratory activity, skin temperature, skin conductance. We figure out from the data which room is the one that feels the calmest or the most at ease for people.
Where does your physiology feel most peaceful? I think it's what people are searching for. The space between the notes, the place where they can come and just be.
The interiors where we work and where we live have a deep impact on our well-being. We've always known it and believed in it, but we haven't been able to quantify it and prove it. You enter a space and it's like, I like it, but why?
This is about data used as a mirror back to yourself. Data is just a bunch of numbers, and we wanted to make it artistic in its expression.
It can be really hard to put an aesthetic experience into words. But suddenly by combining science and technology, we get a new language.
We've selected room 2 as the room that you were the most calm in.
Maybe a watercolor can tell more than 1,000 words.
Technology has the ability to help you know yourself better. The problems of the future are only going to become more complicated. Solutions have to happen in this collaboration of technology, the arts, and science.
So people generally have lots of questions about how do we do it. Was everyone? Was it open to everybody? And yes, it was a public exhibition. Anybody could walk through it. We left people for 5 minutes in each room. They weren't allowed to speak to each other or have phones, which was quite a thing. And I had the pleasure of also curating things to keep people busy during that time. So I had some fun with that in terms of thinking about the first space as kind of an intimate, more of referring to a cave, which just seemed to make sense to me, to be the first place to start and to work with earthy materials, rounded corners, lighting that came from the bottom. Very thick wood, a tapestry that was dyed with dyes that came from flowers, to really have a space have integrity in that way so that we could study this and, or at least get some kind of an idea of what actually is happening and be able to mirror that back to people. So we started with that. The first room, the second one was very colorful and lighting was all over the place, and I had a bunch of pop-up books in there and all my favorite childhood things, so I could inflict them on everyone. And the third one was really a much more kind of a subtle, neutral space, or at least what we hoped would be neutral, where it had walls that were made out of a paper material. Lighting was very subtle and came from the top. And we commissioned some wood, large wood works that were burnt, so they had a smell. People would touch them and sort of smell the burnt wood and kind of feel it. So whatever we could do to enhance whatever it is, a certain group of feelings that we thought we would like to have them express. It was very interesting to see it. I did the data was all deleted. Nobody kept anything. So when people came out, I just sat there for 6 days and did a informal exit poll, talking to people and seeing if their reactions actually matched. And it was very, very, very interesting to see how many people felt like it was true and how many people didn't. And also to see moments when there would be a couple that would go in and look at something and smile at the same time at something, and you could see the flares at the same time. These were just moments of connection that actually became very visible through this experiment, so it was really lovely. I tend to call it an experiment. It's a mistake. It's not an experiment. It was really just an exploration is really what I should call it.
But did they match?
Sorry?
Did they match the data with what people self-reported? Because define public space?
It doesn't often match. No, yeah, and it was very interesting because there were things like implicit bias, you know, like people's cultural differences that they bring in. I had actually one of the most potent reactions I had was someone who came from, I come from India, somebody else who came also from a third world country who had a very socioeconomic lens on how they were experiencing these spaces, which was also amazing because as architects and builders of space, you know, this is something we absolutely need to take consideration of and really think about how everyone is experiencing this in terms of equality, you know. So that was really interesting as well.
So those little wristbands,
Mm-hmm.
like you could put those on and have people walk around in like the parks or
Yeah.
whatever. And,
Anywhere,
and
yep.
then sort of how we recorded it, you know, like what part of the built environment you're used to what. And depending on what you're, I guess what was the flares were like the most
they measured, you know, heart rates and conductance, things like that. So when somebody's excited about something, those things change. You know, there is actually a psychologist who works out of Canada, Colin Ellard, who does a lot of studies of urban space. So you guys know him well. He's absolutely wonderful and does these kinds of things where you can go on these walking tours with him and then really look at, you know, which parts of the urban environment. And he's talking about something that's really what he calls psychological sustainability, which is something that he thinks is really important. And I really am fascinated by this idea that we need to introduce that metric into our thinking about environment as well.
From the wristband, could you tell if most people felt calmer or less calm?
We didn't collect anything, so it was hard to know. You know, it was really just, we did do a mock-up because we did want to kind of test this in California and see if it would even, you know, yield anything that we could look at, and it did. But we didn't keep anything, so it's hard to know. Yeah.
One thing also that we've tried this time before is very interesting that there's such a difference in a short-term experience versus a long-term
Right.
experience, and that's again another thing that's really,
Yeah.
like when you're going into an exhibit, it's a very different context.
It is, yeah, and we did our best to kind of prepare or, you know, sort of clean the palette before we could get here, because even the space that we picked was kind of this very kind of neutral, modern, minimal space, but you went through an open courtyard, you went through a white space before you went into, you know, so doing all the things that we do as architects normally, but really just to do it from a very kind of conscious perspective, to really see if we can get something out of it. Yeah, it's so complicated and so interesting. Any other questions? No?
I was curious, you bring up integrity a lot with the work about it being, you know, that you're using materials that are, you know, in sort of the realist form, whatever that means. And I'm wondering, do you think that there's a certain budget required for integrity of space to be communicated? Or
No.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. I just meant that in that condition where you're doing an exhibition that's temporary, that goes up and comes down, generally what you see is a facsimile of a real thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and in our case, because we were trying to have some kind of integrity around this, we didn't want that to happen, which made my job much more difficult, to build it in 5 days. But, you know, there we are. Yeah. No, I don't think so at all.